Data assets allow you to separate your data from your blueprints and game logic, which enables you to easily create variants of objects and make your projects much more organized. Within a primary data asset, you define all variables you need, including more complex things such as arrays, mappings, structs, and even textures, objects, and so on. For example, data assets can be used to define the stats of each party member, attributes of each attack, properties of each item in your inventory, and many more things without you having to create hundreds of child blueprints and without having to use a data table, which can be hard to manage. When working with data assets, the first thing we have to do is create a primary data asset that defines our properties, so let's do that. In the content drawer, right-click, make a new blueprint class, and now here, in all classes, you want to search for primary data asset. Click this one, and then click on select. The prefix here is PDA underscore, and I will call PDA underscore item. Because for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to create a couple of variants of items. Double-click to open it up, and then here in the editor, we want to create variables, one variable for each property we want our data asset to have. And this depends very much on what you want to create, so let me give you some examples. The battle character data in my JRPG is quite complex, and it has text for the display name, a textured 2D soft reference for the portrait image, it has some structs and arrays for attributes, and also mappings for voice lines and for the level skills. For a finished character, it would look something like this, where we can then define the name, the picture, the attacks, and all of the skills. A more simple use case would be an item where you have an item name, icon, the max stack size, and a skill which is a different data asset. And we get that if we define the variables like this. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to recreate that item data, adding the item name of type text, the icon of type texture 2D, soft object reference, the max stack size of type integer, and the skill of type PDA skill data, which is a different type of data asset that I created before, so you're not going to have access to this. But it's just an example. If you then compile, you can set the default values on the right side, so let's say for the max stack size, it's probably going to be 99 for most items, so it makes sense to set the default value. For the item name, you could just call it item as a placeholder in case we forget to fill it out. And for the icon, we could also just have a placeholder here. Great, and now we have the primary data asset, and we can now create variants of this. And back in the content drawer, we sadly can't right-click on the PDA item, just create them here, because we don't want to create a child blueprint. This is actually different. We just want to right-click here and search for data asset. And there's two different ones. We want the one with the pie chart. Then here for the class, we have to select our PDA item or whatever you called it for your game and select it. Now the prefix I like to use here is DA for data asset underscore item or whatever yours is called underscore and then the variant name. First I'm going to create a health potion, so I'm going to call it DA underscore item underscore health potion. If we double click this, we now get this nice graphical interface. And I want to set the name here to health potion. And it's important to click enter here. Then for the icon, I want to look for potion and select the health potion, which I have here. Max stack size is fine as the default. And for the skill, I want to look for the health potion skill, which again is just something for this example to show you can actually use a data asset within a data asset, but you would first have to set up multiple data assets. And now I want to create another variant. And now instead of having to go here and look for data asset, it's probably faster to just right click the data asset and duplicate it. And now I can just call DA underscore item underscore, let's say super potion. And I can double click this one and then also just fill all of this out here. And it's that easy to create a variant. And this doesn't just work for potions, this works for any type of item depending on how we set this up. So I hope you're starting to understand just how powerful it is to have this separate from the blueprint and then to be able to just set the data in this nice graphical interface. And by the way, if you want to go really deep with data assets, you might want to check out my Unreal Engine JRPG Masterclass, which will teach you how to make an awesome 2D 3D hybrid RPG with turn-based combat through roughly 35 hours of video content. It being a large-scale project, I really emphasize teaching you important programming concepts, and we use best practices throughout the entire course, paying attention to naming conventions, folder structure, using interfaces and avoiding hard references, and of course also data assets. So the course won't just teach you how to make RPGs, but you'll acquire knowledge that would otherwise take you multiple years to get, and you can apply to any type of game you'll make in Unreal. If that sounds interesting to you, please check it out from the link in the description. Okay, great. And now we have our primary data assets and two variants of the data assets, but we're not really using them anywhere yet. Again, there's many different ways we could use them inside of blueprints, and it depends on what you want to do. But to show you what you will do most of the time, I just open up the blueprint for my player, and on the event graph, I want to demonstrate it next to begin play. So to use a data asset, we can go to the variables here, create a new variable, and let's just say I'm going to call it health item. And then for the type, I want to specify the PDA underscore item, which is the one that we created, and it should be an object reference. Now, if I compile, you can see the default value on the right side, and here I can now pick my health potion or my super potion, which are my two variants. Let's just use the health potion here, and I can then drag this out because it is just a variable into the event graph, into any function, anywhere in this blueprint. And to then access any of the information we have here, right, like the name, the icon, the stack size, I can just drag off here from the health item and type in get and then scroll all the way to the bottom. And you can see we can get icon, get item name, get max stack size, get skill. And now you could use this to show something on the screen, show the name, show the icon, or enforce the max stack size if you gain a new item. Maybe use the skill to play the heal skill and heal other players, or whatever you want to set up in here. You could have skeletal meshes, you could have so many different things inside of this data asset. And just as a quick demonstration, I will get the name and I will just print it out here. Just print a string and connect it. And then if I start the game, you can see it says health potion on the top left. If I were to then go back in here and on the health item, I can just change it to the super potion. If I start again, now you can see it prints super potion and we get all of the other attributes of the super potion. And something like this is a very common use case, but there's also other ways of using it, especially for the items. We're going to have multiple items, not just the one held item, most likely. So let me just go back in here, delete this, and also delete this. And for the example of an inventory, I have this set up on the game instance, and I'm using the PDA item as a mapping to an integer. So we can specify that we have 5 health potions, right? So we have the health potion with a mapping to the number 5. We have 2 super potions, and I also put in the hyper potion that I just created off screen, where we have a 1. But of course, you could also just use an array if you have a different use case. I then have this widget for the item list that shows up during battle, and here I have a function called populate items that looks into this mapping of the inventory, right, the PDA item object to integer reference, and then it sets the properties on each button here, right? So then you can see we get the item name here, we set the text, you can see we get the item, data, the icon, and yeah, that is used to then update the text here. And during combat, it then looks like this, and you can see here's the icon, here's the name, here's the current amount that is in the mapping, right, the 5 to 1, and this is just a very nice use case of these data assets. And everything else you see here is also made with data assets, right? The icon is pulled from the data asset that is attached to the battle characters, the name here, the HP, the MP, all of this comes from different types of data assets. And that is basically how you set up and use data assets, and there are just so many great use cases for them. I hope you now understand how this can often be a better solution than just setting your default values directly in the blueprint, and often it's also better than just using structs or data tables. So I definitely encourage you to give data assets a try in your current project. As always, a huge thanks to my awesome patrons and YouTube channel members.